Welcome to the show that explores the methods and strategies on rocking the financial side of your music business. With over 40 years combined experience, here are your hosts, Chris Webb and Dave Tampkin.
Welcome to Musician's Tip Jar, where we talk about musicians and money. Where we would like to remind you that this pursuit is a marathon, not a sprint. I'm Chris Webb, joined by my co-host and the guy who's always on the move, Dave Tampkin.
Hello, Chris. Thanks for having me back. I'm calling in from Westminster, Colorado today. Always on the move.
That's 100% true. If we look through all these episodes, every episode you're in some different place, in a hotel, in a different state, in your car.
You think I'd be getting better at it. I tried to come see you play when I arrived last Wednesday. Flight was an hour late because of micro bursts into Denver. And then I got this really cheap rental service for a car for 1 week, $200. Absurd for a week to have a car. It said, go underneath the A sign. So I'm just thinking that that's the bus, whatever bus is there. But I did not see how many other different companies were underneath the A sign. So I got on the first Ace bus. How you doing? Tip the guy $5. Let everyone go in front of me because I wasn't in a rush. Here we go, miss. After you get there, they're like, we don't have any record of you. Can I see your papers? Oh, this is not the right place. You need to go 4 miles into town. And I had to get an Uber, and the whole time sweating, trying to see if I could come see you play. It was embarrassing only for myself, but I think by this time I should just be able to read signs and paperwork.
I have gotten to the age where I'm willing to spend a little bit more to know exactly how I'm going to run down my I don't travel as much as you, but that's where I'm at with travel now. I'll pay the extra $100, which you might have spent on your Uber.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't cheap, but it was in the middle of nowhere. I said to the bus driver, I'll give you $20. Just get me. He's like, where you're supposed to be is so far away. You'd have to pay me more than $20. So I really screwed up.
Oh, that's funny. Today we jump into our story with guest Brenden James. He takes us on a journey of starting late with his career in music, racing to the top with not just one but multiple major label record deals, and finishing those just to find himself at the starting line of what would become his most successful career in music and songwriting. Today's quote comes from our guest Brenden James. He says, "All these labels were seeing this clay in me, this raw thing, but no one could refine it except for time, experience, and touring."
Brenden James also brings us our nonprofit, something that's dear to him. It's called oneworldhealth.com. One World Health fills the gaps left by government, temporary, and narrowly focused healthcare efforts in third world countries. They've created a smarter, sustainable, permanent approach that puts the power to heal back into communities' hands. They build healthcare facilities that provide a full scope of medical services and are designed to be affordable and accessible. The best and the brightest local physicians are identified and receive ongoing training from One World Health's team of U.S. board-certified physicians. Best of all their medical centers are designed to be 100% operational and self-sufficient in 18 to 24 months. Learn more at oneworldhealth.com.
Brenden James is an American singer-songwriter in the pop folk genre who has reached the #1 spot on iTunes multiple times. He's accrued more than 1 million fans in 65 countries on Spotify and has played on multiple formats of American and European radio. He has collaborated on tours with the likes of John Mayer, John Legend, Cat Stevens, Keb Mo, and Andy Grammer, and has songs that have been placed in over 15 major television shows and films worldwide. Penning songs on the topics of love, optimism, political enlightenment, simplifying, self-empowerment, marriage equality, raising a family, aging, and adventuring aimlessly through the natural world, James has left no stone unturned in his 6 studio albums to date, and in his words, I've only just begun. Too often, we are looking behind us to measure our success, and use that to judge what is likely to come. Brenden reminds us that the journey is the destination, and that if you can live this way, your best days are always going to be in front of you. This is an amazing story, and he tells it better than any other human. So please enjoy our interview with Brenden James. Well, let's go.
James, how are you?
Sweet. I'm good. What's up, guys?
Yeah, our first question usually is, have you been in any speed walking competitions in the last
I
year?
haven't personally entered any. I certainly don't enter any when Craig is around because I think his hips were, he was born differently. His hips do things that hips aren't supposed to do. And
They don't.
he the man, he doesn't like running. You're not going to see Craig running, but if you ask him to walk fast, you won't believe your eyes. It's insane. It's literally insane.
Makes his partner very lucky, I guess.
I guess so. I guess so. So no, I haven't. I've been running a lot though, Dave, like a ton. It's been really, I'm getting addicted. I'm turning into one of those annoying running people who just wants to talk about running all the time.
It's happened.
But
Have that breakthrough where you feel so amazing, and I gotta.
yeah, it's exactly it. So no speed walking, but a lot of running, basically.
What made you start with the longer runs?
And Chris is already laughing. That's not a joke, okay? That's a serious question. And I am going to be mature. I'm going to maturely answer that question. This is sincere stuff that Dave is trying to start with. Dave, I didn't start with the longer runs. This is like 18 months or 2 years ago I started running, and I just kind of eased my way into it, and definitely had some injuries early on and had to like realize that at my age you have to really strength train your legs and work on your muscles before you try to run more than 5 miles, basically. So I did a lot of that, and still, I mean, in these last 18 months, I think I've had like 3 serious injuries from this ridiculous pursuit. And yet I still love it. And I just tried my big first long race a couple weeks ago, and it wasn't a sanctioned race, but it was with friends. It was really fun.
How would you compare that to the beginning of your music career? Would you say sprint, or would you say it's been a few marathons in there?
Let me see if I can draw that comparison for you. In the beginning of my music career, it felt like I was running through woods that I had never been in before. I was definitely running, and I was definitely lost. And I was like climbing this and that tree, trying to figure things out. And that might be as far as I can take that analogy, but it was crazy.
Can you give us a little background to what inspired you to start playing piano? And even if that is your first instrument, we haven't really talked much. When we have the opportunity to hang out, we really don't talk so much about,
That's
music,
true.
family, and how things have been and the road's been treating you. So could you give us a little history?
Yeah, of course. I really wasn't thinking I was going to go into music. When I was in high school, I was going to be like a psychology major. I kind of wanted to go into therapy, maybe be a therapist. And I was just trying to get into a good college at that point. But around that time when I was 17, I met a mentor in my hometown. And he's part of my story till the day I die. He sort of found me out of nowhere and said, I've been hearing you sing around town. I've been hearing your name. Have you ever thought of writing your own music? And I was like, no way. I like to sing. That's all I know. But I'm, trying to go down to North Carolina for college, and I got a lot on my mind. And he's like, well, why don't you hang out at my place a little bit? Let me play some classic music for you. And I did. I went like 10 or 20 times to his apartment and just listened to, and he would just show me like Bob Dylan and Patsy Cline and Stevie Wonder, and really, really talked to me about how they were phrasing and the words they were using. He was this like super deep guy. And man, did it make an impression to just be that young, really impressionable age and realize, wow, I do have a voice, and I think I can write poems. I should learn an instrument like this guy is suggesting. So I started to learn piano when I was like 17, just real shitty, like real, could barely play a chord, just enough to write songs. But I took that new passion down to college, and I spent countless hours in piano rooms on that campus writing my own songs. I was so addicted by that point.
You kind of are saying that the songwriting bug came first before even really diving into an instrument?
Yes, that was the initial impetus to go to the instrument. Yeah. I was like, I heard all these great songwriters and I was like, wow, I want to try that. I want to try writing a song, because it to me at that point, singing for people wasn't doing it for me. It never has. It's always been a strange thing about me. I don't like to just sing for people. Like, if countless times in my life I've been in a I don't know, a random place and someone's like, oh, will you sing that for us all? And I'm like, if I'm not at my instrument singing a song I wrote, I'm not really feeling it. I don't want to just use my voice and sing a cover song and like just show people that I can sing. It just never, it's something deeper than that for me. So the writing of the song, I think, was crucial to me doing this career.
Yeah. How many songs would you say you've written at this point?
I think there's 80 on Spotify, and I think to get those 80, I've probably written 300 or 400 or so. To whittle it down. You know how that is. Just you got to whittle it down, and I'm pretty damn selective about what I'll release. So it's been the joy of my life to write songs. It's something I'm so proud of, and it gives me so much joy to sit down and write. It's amazing.
When was the change from being in those college rooms playing piano, writing songs, to say, okay, I want to hit a stage. I want to try this in front of people?
That came a couple of years into college. I didn't want to do it until I had maybe 5 of my own songs or 7 of my own songs that I thought were actually good.
Yeah.
So probably sophomore or junior year of college, I got like a really small gig at a bar called W.B. Yates Pub in Chapel Hill. And, like 14 people came and I sang 7 songs and that was kind of my first real gig, I guess. I was addicted, man. I was addicted from there. Just kept writing. And then by the end of college, I was like, all right, well, where did Stevie Wonder start? Where did Dylan go? Where you got to go to New York City. It was like a no-brainer for me. I didn't know anything about New York, but I knew after the day I graduated, I needed to set my sights on New York. And so I did. Like 2 months after I graduated, I moved into an apartment in Jersey so I could save money and find a connection to move into Manhattan. And I was in that apartment with some friends for like 4 months. And then I met somebody in Manhattan who had a 5-bedroom apartment or house kind of in Stuyvesant Town on First Ave and 14th Street. And she had 4 girls and me. So it was a 5-bedroom. And I think I paid $750 for rent. But I had arrived in New York City, and that was kind of my whole start after college.
When you hit New York, what was the first thing that you did to say, okay, I need to find venues? Were you looking for a manager? Did you start building your team at that point?
I say this to everybody who's starting out. Like the manager thing was really big for me at that point. I in college, this same year, graduated. My manager Ben, he's like, you know what? If you're going to move to New York, then I'm going to find a way to go there too, because he just had such an ambition to be a manager, and he's like, I'm gonna find a way to manage you. I don't know how. Give me 6 months or a year. I'll find my way up there. And so once he got up there, it was really helpful to just have one other person who wasn't in the band, but just was thinking nonstop about how to get you and your music heard. He was a crucial step to me.
Must have been nice to have someone you can trust like that out of the gates. And he's building a career as well because he believes in you and wants to do this for his creative outlet. So
yeah, exactly.
We talked to a lot of people about, should I move to a big city? Like, that's a constant conversation that we have. And has it changed since the internet has really come along? Obviously, that has changed some things, but I'm curious for you. You moved to New York City, you got a room, You were still getting started, very beginning of your career as an artist. And what was it like? Okay, what do I do next? There must have been at some point been like, okay, there's got to be a plan put together. There's got to be some sort of direct effort towards a goal of some sort. What was it that you had going on?
There's a lot I could say about that, because that is the sort of question for all time's sake, is like, do you move to a city or not? And obviously it's very different now. We're talking about 2002 when I got out of college. So this is a long time ago. I still think there's a lot of value in your early career in putting yourself in a city. I might be old school with that, but I really do feel like the places you're going to perform in a city and the audience that's going to watch you, it's just going to be a bit elevated from your small town. And the players you're going to get to call on and play with, everyone's just going to be a little bit more serious about their craft. And because of that, you get better. And say what you will about New York or LA or Nashville, the connections you're going to meet are more likely to be people who are actually connected.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a desire to have a traditional music career where you have touring and you might have a label or an indie label and you want real fans and real shows and real connections, I do think there's something still important putting yourself there physically.
Yeah.
And then doing a ton online and having your whole online thing, when you go home. But
yeah.
And that doesn't have to last forever. It could last 3 years or 5 years, and then you get out of there. I only lasted like 10 years in all of that stuff. So that's kind of one answer. And the other answer is like, what was our goal? I remember our goal just being, we need professional recordings of what it is that I do. What am I writing? And back then it wasn't as visual. It wasn't as social media based. It was just, you need a good recording.
Yep.
Which I really do miss those days. Like, because that's like what music is. Music is a recording. Music is for people around their house. 95% of the time, you're just a recording in their car or their headphones or their house speaker. And there was something simple about that. And so we just needed to make a high quality recording. So it was always like, who's the producer? How good of a recording can we get? And then once we just continue to level up that recording, what can we do with it? And at that point, it was like, how do we pitch it to labels at that point, back in the day?
Let's talk about Capitol Records.
Sure.
You now don't sound so excited when I ask that question. I mean, hold on a little bit.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm sure your feeling now is different than when you started. So when you first get signed and you built your sound to where you wanted to pitch it, can you bring us through that experience? And I'm sure there was a lot of excitement at the time.
Oh my gosh. I have a really healthy picture of it all now. And part of that healthy picture is how fucking exciting that buildup was. And so to go from where we just were, which was me and Ben trying to make recordings of my songs, we finally found a real producer. Like, that was so hard to find back then. Just like, you couldn't do it in your homes as much as you can now. You had to find like a producer who knew how to work in a real studio. We finally found somebody. He loved it. He believed in me so much. And his name was Tony Bruno. Such a badass. And I was transfixed with Tony Bruno. I was like, a real producer. He's such a great guitar player, knew what he was doing in the studio, loved my stuff. And we spent the next, 8 months or so making this EP up near Woodstock, New York. We make this EP. Fast forward, Tony and Ben are like, we got to get a showcase going on in New York. In these days, it's all about a showcase. A lot can happen from one good showcase.
Mm-hmm.
So didn't have a ton of fans yet. I was playing venues around New York, like Joe's Pub and the Cutting Room and the Living Room. And so we got as many fans as we could for mine. Tony got a bunch of people together. Ben got people together. My wife, she was my girlfriend at the time. And the showcase was on 05/05/05. I love that date. And we filled up the living room down on the Lower East Side, and we just put the word out. Tony and Ben and anybody they knew put the word out to all the record labels. And I think like 4 major labels came, including like Tom Wally flew in. He's like the head of Warner Brothers, flew in, sat in the audience. Epic was there, Atlantic was there, Capitol was there. It was just, the room was just like bubbling with excitement. It's one of the most exciting nights in my whole life. We crushed the performance, like just felt so good about it. And then Warner Brothers is interested, Atlantic is interested, Capitol takes me out on the curb. I'm standing there with their head of A&R, and this guy, Dan McCarroll, I'll never forget, was like, listen, there's a lot of interest here, a lot of excitement, but I'm going to tell you right now, if you get on a plane in the morning to Hollywood, we're going to sign you to a 5-album deal at Capitol Records. But you can't listen to any of these people anymore. You got to ignore them. And I'm looking at this guy, I'm like, oh my gosh, is this really happening? And Ben is like excited but stressed, like how to handle all these offers and all this opportunity. And I don't know, about 20 minutes later, we looked at each other and we were like, let's go to Hollywood. Let's just say yes. So the next morning they flew us to Hollywood, and before I know it, I'm walking into the Capitol Records building, and they're like, there's a meeting and a showcase for 40 members of their staff and their president. And they asked me to play 3 songs. So they wheel out Nat King Cole's piano. I'm in like Capitol Records recording studio A. We're like the Beatles and Dylan. And I'm like looking around at all these microphones. I'm like, what is going on? I play 3 songs, and the president comes over and shakes my hand. He's like, welcome to the Capitol family. Why don't you come up and we'll talk about a deal? I was like, oh my God. It was just that real storybook moment. And sure enough, we signed the deal, and it was a 5-album deal. And, you know, from there, it got pretty interesting. It was quite a roller coaster for the next 2 years, but that was a really exciting time for me.
So prior to getting signed, could you tell us how that compares to what you were doing, playing music pretty much for a living before then? And then you hit this point where they're like 5-album deal, and there has to come some kind of peace with that to say, hey, I'm don't have to go backwards, I'm moving forward. Can you describe the feeling of the financial differences between before and after that?
I'm an open book about that. I mean, and let me be clear, I was not working full time as a musician. For that first 18 months or 20 months in New York City, I was working at Urban Outfitters for $9.50 an hour. So my bank account, I always had like between $1,800 and $2,500 max in my bank account. And I was just that, and that might be generous. And I was always like, how am I going to get this $750 rent every month? And I'd watch my account go down to like $800. And I'm like, oh my God, I got to get another check from Urban Outfitters. And that was the first couple years.
But you always look good.
So
you were dressed like a king.
I had the 30% discount at Urban. So, I mean, there was always clothes. And honestly, it went from, I walk out of the Capitol Records building, 2 weeks later, my lawyer's like, okay, we've drawn up the deal. The advance, it's in your bank account. And I was like, okay. So I was on 55th Street at the time. I went to an ATM and I just like typed in my PIN. And instead of like $1,300, it said $125,000. And I just looked at that ATM and I looked around. I was like, is this real? It's just like, what is going on? So it was like, and you're talking about like I'm like a hustler. I've never had a lot of money. I've always been so frugal. My mom raised me really frugal. We had the things we needed, but never excess of any kind. And so that was such an enormous moment for me. It just kind of went on from there, really. Just what do we do with that much money? I think I bought a nice camera. I think I bought this piano. Wow. Yeah, this piano was like $4,000 or something. And I had a down payment because my girlfriend and I needed a car. Didn't even get a nice car. I think I got like a Saturn or something. I don't even know what I got, some brand new car, but I'm so frugal. I didn't want to spend a lot of that money. And
Can you repeat that again? Because this episode is actually sponsored by Saturn.
Saturn. It was a great company. Great company, reliable. I don't think that company will ever fold. They did fold.
No, I didn't. Sorry.
They started advertising on podcasts, Chris. When you come into that kind of money, did you have a plan to say, okay, I'm going to budget this way? What were your expenses like? You're going to record now, so you have to make sure that they're going to recoup that as well, I'm sure. So was it a different way to look at finances to set yourself up for this 5-album deal?
Dave, I would love to tell you that I was able to look at that amount of money maturely at the time. I would love to tell you that we got a budget going on, but I basically quit my job, and my manager and I looked at that money, like 70% of that money we were just going to use back into the career for all the countless things you could do. And when you really take out my living expenses and travel expenses, like you're looking at like 80 grand. And it's like, how long does 80 grand even last when you have so many things that you can spend it on, from music videos to press to touring? I mean, just those three things alone, as we all know, can eat up so much money per month. So I think we were just super frugal with it. I think that's why it did last a little while. And I wasn't paying for anything like travel, like as far as traveling to make the albums or to hire any of the musicians or producers that was also coming out of Capitol. So I think my trick to having a budget and a plan has just always been, just don't touch it. Don't touch it until you need it. That's like literally how I think, survived. And I wish I could give you more of a detailed budget mindset, but I've never really had one.
It's better than most would say. So
Just never had one. I mean, so we go into like making the first album, and there's so many stories, but basically it fails. They don't like it. Capitol doesn't like what we made. So we have to scrap that after being in like the fanciest studio with all the most expensive players. It was so exciting, but they don't like it. They put me with another producer named Pat Leonard. He had just worked with like Elton John and Madonna, and he comes in, and again, all the best players in the world walking in and around that studio. We make the highest quality sounding record. Capitol doesn't like it. And we're like, what is going on? They've spent, I mean, the total was like $600,000 or $700,000 at that point, and they're just not liking it. And they don't care. Those are the old days. They just, let's spend more. So as we're about to do a third attempt on a third producer, Andy Slater, the president, gets fired. And the new guy, Jason Flom, comes in and says, Brenden, we're so sorry. We know it's been a roller coaster. I have my artists that I believe in, that I signed, that I'm bringing with me now. And I just don't know your story. And I'm so sorry. I think Capitol, we have to say goodbye. I was like, okay. But he did an amazing thing. And he said, we want to pay you severance. You can keep whatever masters you made, and we want to pay you 90 grand to leave Capitol. And I was like, okay, that could be worse.
yeah,
So I left
Capitol. You hear that story? Never.
I don't know. It was really an interesting time, man. It was a really interesting time. And he really did. He personally called me. And that's a big deal, I think, for a big old record exec to call you. And anyway, and we took that money, and finally I feel like started what has become my career, because we took that money and we paid Michael Blue, a great producer who had just worked with Colby Calais, and we just loved his mellow pop style. And I just felt like I'm paying him from my money now, and I'm going to watch the dollars now, and we're going to try to turn this into touring and fans. And that's what we did.
So you got to keep those old masters too from the two albums they chose to not use?
Yeah, we did. But, I never released them. I wasn't, they didn't feel like me. They felt like the production felt like a little bit too much and unfinished. And I don't know, I just got all tangled. And basically Andy Slater, when he didn't like it, he would hire Capitol's in-house producer to tweak it over and over until we could get it more pop or more commercial, all these things. And so all these songs had just been like tweaked and re-recorded drums and re-recorded bass lines, and it just like didn't feel cohesive. So I didn't really need those masters, just kind of moved on.
What I love about that story, I mean, you have an incredible story, but this gives that evidence that $700,000 doesn't make the music what you want it to be. It doesn't guarantee anything.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
What happens next? Like with this new album now that you've got it on your own, with the producer that you're paying out of your own pocket.
And that was finally the sound that I wanted. It finally was authentically me. And let me also say that I think this is a real thing. As an artist, I'm not sure I was ready until this album, and maybe not even when I made my first album. Like, I started so late, and I was just this like late blossoming thing that I don't think I found my vocal delivery, my true like power as a performer and songwriter until I was in my 30s, because I started when I was 17. And so all that early stuff, I think these labels were seeing this clay in me and this raw thing, but no one could refine it except for time and experience and touring. So I think that's a good thing. Like, if there are any newer artists listening and you're frustrated and you're wondering why you're not getting the attention you think you deserve yet, you might find in 3 years from today, you'll listen to the recordings you're making now and think, oh, it's because like I wasn't good enough yet, or I hadn't practiced enough yet, or I hadn't found the right producer to make the right sound yet. And don't be too hard on yourself. You know, I made that album, and Ben, I'm going to give him a lot of credit because we got signed again to Decca Universal. He took that album and a lot of hustle and ambition. And so there I was on Decca, and that was great. We got another budget going on. They would pay for the second album. They sent me to London for 10 weeks to work with Martin Terefi and some great writers. And I made a whole other, basically 8 recordings in 10. I just got to live in London in an apartment for 10 weeks on Universal's dime. It was insane. But I get back from that. They're not real happy. Once again, I hadn't made songs that were commercial enough. This is a trend in my life, I guess. And so they're like, well, let's put you on the LA writing circuit for like 6 or 8 months. So that was the first time I did all this co-writing around LA. And finally, just a combination of all of it, I made my second album with Universal. I love that album, real proud of it. Went hard on the promotion of it. And I don't know, 10 months later, they said it wasn't catching at radio, so we're going to have to let you go. And I was like, I see how this is going. You spend a bunch of money in basically one avenue, because that's all the label really knew how to do, especially then. We'll put all our press and all our efforts behind that one plan. And if that plan doesn't work after 10 or 12 weeks of spending money, then all we know how to do is say it didn't work. So see you later.
Do you see how I kept all of the running metaphors in there? That's why I was tripping over it all. Yeah, that's another running metaphor. I can't stop.
You really have to see drummer Craig do a speed walking seminar for you after a gig, like in the middle of the street. It's just a rare art form that you can't have a foot off the ground. Otherwise, it's considered running. Totally. So it's a sight to see for sure.
I've seen people speed walking around the neighborhood for exercise, and I'm sure it's amazing exercise. I'm sure it's probably just as healthy for you as running, but it just looks silly, you know?
Walk, don't run. I am walking.
Well, I do appreciate when I hear a good story, you know, when people are not only have great stories to tell, but can tell them in such a great way. And you can tell that Brenden is a great songwriter just by listening to him tell the story of his journey through this career so far. And there's a lot to point out here. The first thing I just kind of wanted to say was that a lot of people feel like if they haven't started making a serious career by the time they're getting done with high school, they think that they're already too far behind on that journey to ever have a chance. And I think he gave such a great example by telling his story about the fact that he really was just learning how to play the piano well at the age of 17. That's usually a very different storyline, but it didn't make a difference, right? It never got him to hesitate pursuing what he felt like he wanted to do.
I love his lyrics that he described him as, well, he first said, I started writing poems first. But if you
Mm-hmm.
take any one of his songs, they're poems. They're beautiful pieces of work that you can read through and not need the melody, but it flows so nicely. From there to then woodshed an instrument for so many years before playing live is such a drive that you don't see very often. But when you know what you want to do and you're going to push yourself to get there, that he had this seed growing inside him. I want to be a songwriter. I'm already writing poems, but I want to do something more with these. And to have that vision of longevity and the work that he's going to have to put in, I found very inspiring.
Yeah, that is also unique, right? That the idea that he could start writing songs before he really got an instrument to play them on. In fact, I can only think of one other person where I've ever met that was their story. So it's a unique perspective, and I do think, like you said, like you can hear that in his lyrics. That the lyrics kind of come first. The words and the melodies are very much in charge of what happens instrumentally. I'm the opposite. When I write songs, I always start with chords, and the chords kind of find a melody within them, and then the melody kind of starts phonetically creating sounds that turn into words. It's it's like the opposite approach to creating. So then he talked about moving to New York. That is another one of these reoccurring, especially this season. I feel like we've talked so much more about relocating in order to pursue your dreams more than ever. And here's another example where he reiterated the value of being in a community where the biggest opportunities were just naturally occurring around him.
And for the music he was playing, he did the research. I mean, he uses Stevie Wonder as, well, where was he living? What did he do? But he wanted to go somewhere where he knew the community was already built. And he did it without a net, kind of like Megan Burt in a way, where he was able to make it work. 5 roommates, whatever he needed to do to get there.
Yeah, we have this image of it being so romanticized, the journey to the top. And
Yeah.
I think when we look back at it, we see some of that. We romanticize our story a little bit looking back, but the reality is it's often very much doing whatever you have to do, right? And suffering through moments that are uncomfortable and being in situations that feel scary and sometimes being overwhelmed. Those are parts of trying to do great things, and when you move to a new place, that's especially New York City.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any place bigger of a move to do than that. So I feel that, because I do think that there's nothing that makes you feel out of your sorts than moving. And this, you just did it, but moving to a new place and trying to get settled into a new routine with new everything, and it's just a lot.
At least he's accumulating all these life adventures for his songs. It's not like for lack of having anything to write about when you put yourself in a situation.
Yeah, right. That's another little reminder, right? Like, life is for the living. If you do find yourself ever running out of things to write about, maybe that is a little hint that you need to get out there and do something, something that puts you out of your comfort zone.
You really didn't have to prompt him too much in this interview as far as what we wanted to get out of him. And it was a nice transition when he would talk about where he was in New York. And then he also was able to start building a team that wanted to help him before he was even really asking for it, that he needed someone to help him start booking, look at different record labels. That's got to feel good too, especially if you're moving to a new city pretty much alone for the most part, but you have someone that believes in you as much as you believe in yourself to say, hey, I'm going to do whatever I can to make this dream happen, because I want to be a part of it, because I want to be a manager. I want to do these things in my life too. So now you got 2 guys going after the dream.
Yep. I love listening to people's success stories like that, the rise of all these things that come to fruition from a dream to reality. It's so fun to hear that story, and he tells it so well. It's so exciting. It's just, we can all feel that emotion of how great that must have felt in those moments when he talked about working at Urban Outfitters and then all of a sudden looking in his bank account. I mean, just an amazing feeling. And also an amazing feeling to be around all this great opportunity and still not be able to be who you want to be. Like, it's still something separate to find you, no matter all of the surrounding stuff that's going on. In fact, sometimes the more great things around you telling you to be great, the more it's hard to hear that inner greatness.
That's part of watching you talk right now and getting so involved with your hands that they often disappear into the green screen and then they just pop out of nowhere.
It's like nowhere, and then all of a sudden, boom!
Your excitement is like stutter.
Well, I don't know if there's any other more common feeling than the feeling of not feeling ready in this business. We're always feeling like we're combating imposter syndrome to be an artist, to be as much as we want to be in this business. Sometimes even when you're given the greatest opportunities, you're still going to be challenged with that reality that you have to still find your voice, your way of saying things, your way of doing it, and have the control that you need in order to actually execute it as you.
The last thing I want to mention about this is when you're going through what you just said as an artist or even a person in life, to say you have to be honest to yourself and find these things and follow your passions. He's also surrounding himself with people that believe in him. But when he chose that record label, and although it didn't go the way he wanted it to go, he made such a good choice with those people that they still believed in him to help him get out of that deal in such a positive way. And that surely had to have a lot to do with the momentum forward after that, because we've had interviews here where it doesn't turn out like that. The record label keeps the songs, they keep the album, never sees the light of day again, and then they won't even give it back to you without a fight. Mm-hmm. So that was inspiring. I think that just speaks to what type of person he is.
Definitely. To make sure that I get to use this metaphor of running as much as possible in this episode, today's action step is to try doing a run or walking. You can speed walk if that's what you're more comfortable with, and doing a meditation while you do it. I know that we've never really talked about meditation as a tactic. I wanted to say this because the more that I dive into other books and memoirs of these successful people, and a lot of them being artists, they all talk about this all the time. Meditation is a part of it, and meditation can be done. It doesn't have to be sitting there with your hands up like this, right? Where's my other hand? Here it is. You get the idea. You can actually do this while you're walking, and it can be done while you're exercising. So my suggestion to everyone is, at whatever level you're at, during your walk, you focus on being grateful for what you've got right now. The things that have gotten you through to this point, you kind of just go through this, like tell your own story in your head, like Brenden did so effectively in this episode, and try to get yourself to a point where you feel excited about what's coming next. This might actually turn the way you're seeing things to make you a little more motivated. We know that your time is valuable. We appreciate you spending this time with us and being a part of this community. It's our hope that you feel that sense of community here at Musicians Tip Jar, and that you help spread the word to make us stronger. If you'd like to get a hold of us, or Brenden, what's the best way to do that?
You can reach us at musicianstipjar@gmail.com. Check out our website, musicianstipjar.com, where you can also find resources and discounts we have for all our listeners. Brendan's website is brendanjames.com, and his handle is Brenden James, and Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, OnlyFans.
And you should check us out and all these episodes on YouTube and our new YouTube channel. It would be great if you'd go and like that, because we're just getting started there, and any support is greatly appreciated. You can also watch my hands disappear. It's very entertaining. If you find this information useful, please take a moment and rate and subscribe to the podcast so that we can help keep you up on the finance side of your music business. As always, thank you for joining us, and remember, there is already enough for everyone. You just need to know how to get it. Until next time, on behalf of Dave Tamkin and myself, Chris Webb, stay happy, healthy, and wealthy. Remember, you haven't come this far to only get this far. This is Musicians Tip Jar.
Oh Lord, I could use somebody. I could use somebody.
Nothing Anything on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, business, or financial professional for individualized advice. Individual results are not guaranteed, and all discussed strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The hosts are operating on behalf of Musicians Tip Jar LLC exclusively.
Could use a little help here. Could use some help. Could use a little help here. Could use some help. Could use a little